Kwastamai, hello and welcome to this edition of Agenda on Ewan Gorn. The visitors come marching 2+2 with a new double jab border regime in force from today. But how's it all going to work? On the show we run through the new borders and speak to police about their concurrent operation to stop drug debt collection. And the Chief Minister hits out at sensational reporting. But should he have lodged an official complaint? All this and more on Agenda. Visitors and residents who've had both jabs can now travel to the Isle of Man without the need for mandatory testing or isolation when they arrive. The 2+2 exemption, that's 2 jabs 2 weeks prior to arrival, came into force today, with travellers passing through a new system at entry points across the island. You may have seen the markings on Parade Street car park as part of this. Alex Watton went down there to find out how it all works.
Push the majority of people where they can to do what they need to do online before they arrive. If they do that for us, the experience they're going to get.
So here at the sea terminal, there is a setup for those travelling under this new vaccination exemption. And we have been told the first arrivals should expect some level of delay as the new system beds in. The issue for some who qualify for the new exemption is that they can only apply online to travel under the new measures from 10 o'clock today. And that's because the new rules came into force and into law at 1 minute past midnight. But people don't need to worry. Anyone arriving this morning who is fully vaccinated can still avoid isolation and testing if they just bring photo ID and proof of their vaccination status with them. They'll also need to complete the paperwork when they arrive here at the sea terminal or indeed at Ronaldsway Airport. Well, starting then with the foot passengers then, as you come off and go into that well-known corridor that takes you into the arrivals room where the conveyor belt is for your luggage, that's been split into 2 different sections, 2 pathways. One for those travelling under, say, compassionate reasons or those visiting under the family exemption, and another for this new vaccination exemption, the 2+2, meaning you've had both of your vaccinations and 2 weeks have elapsed since that second vaccination.
We're going to have both members of the Ports Access team and members of the Travel Notification Service on hand from Monday morning to be able to process people or to be able to help people with the forms they need to fill in, make sure they've got the correct evidence to prove their vaccination certification, make sure they've got the correct evidence if needed to prove they've got it right.
As we walk outside then, we're now looking at how it's going to be for those in vehicles. So once you come off the ferry, instead of just going straight through that car park and onto the roundabout outside the sea terminal, the new Parade Street car park has been transformed to be checked in much the same way as foot passengers, but of course in cars. So there are little sheds here and there that drivers pull up to, and you'll be asked the same questions to provide that ID and the proof of your vaccination status, and you will perhaps see some delay as you may have to fill out that information then and there.
There'll be a quick question: do you have everything ready, your ID and everything ready? And then you'll be put into the appropriate lane to be handled by the officers who'll be in those hooks. If you don't have everything ready, you'll be put into a different lane and you'll be handled by somebody different.
I've just been speaking to one of the leaders of the Ports Access team, Nigel Kane, and I asked him how long people should expect to wait.
It depends on if they've got a specific issue, then we will keep them for as long as we need to resolve the issue. If we can't resolve it, but we don't think there's a breach involved with that, we'll take all their details and they'll either be contacted or ask them to contact the Travel Notification Service when they're back. It might mean they have to isolate until such time as they've been cleared. But other than that, no, we won't delay anybody unnecessarily. It's not the plan anyway. We've got no interest. We want the port to operate, we want the roads to be clear, we want people to come here and have a good passenger experience end to end, not just the steam pack, but what we do as well.
Well, I've also been speaking to Annie Taylor, who is the head of Isle of Man borders at the Cabinet Office. It's people in the UK, I suppose, that are harder to reach. Is that the concern?
There is, yes, that is a concern that it's harder to reach. But generally, people who are travelling to a destination, you would hope that they do actually look at what they need to get to that destination. So, but that aside, there will be a number of travellers. So what we've done immediately is on board. There'll be announcements on board. There'll be forms on board for people to fill in. Pre-departure, there'll be questions and checks made pre-departure by the carriers. And also Visit Isle of Man are doing a lot of promotion in the UK as well.
The responsibility is really on the passenger. The passenger has to get their admin sorted, because if they do that, it's dead easy.
Well, you're obviously leader of the Ports Access team, so are you going to have more people than normal, I suppose, at the start with the teething problems.
Yes, absolutely.
And everyone's well briefed, I presume.
Yep, as far as we're trying to anticipate as many of the problems as we possibly can, but there'll always be something that catches us out. So we're prepared for everything we can anticipate. Anything that catches us out, there's quite a lot of experience across the team, and we should be able to sort it. So we're not worried by any way, shape or form. We're just expectant. That's all. It's going to be new, and this is about the 4th incarnation of new at the borders. So we're not unfamiliar with changes, so we're quite adaptable and very flexible. So we hope for it to be smoother than we expect, but we're ready for a rough ride.
The key message really here is there will be problems, but teams here say they are prepared to help and sort them out as they arise. And you can take a look at our video walk around of the Sea Terminal arrival system at manxradio.com and of course on our social media pages.
That report from Alex Watton. Well, many passed through the new checks today. Separate lanes, of course, for test and release and then the 2+2 exemptions. How did they find it? These travellers spoke to BBC Isle of Man's Alex Bell.
We've got things to do. Hopefully we've got loads of catching up to do. So that's what we're going to do. I think I'll start today any road,
It's not been that long, but since I left the island was October.
And you're both double vaccinated?
Yes.
So a hug is just
normal, but it's a bit strange because I'm living in the UK working as a nurse, so it's a bit weird coming over here now with no restrictions.
What are you going to do to celebrate?
Go and take my kids to school. They don't know I'm here.
Oh, fabulous.
So 6 o'clock wake up, get ready, come on. So.
What do you make of the new restrictions being lifted today?
Yeah, it's good. It brings a lot more people back to Isle of Man. I know quite a few of my mates since I've been over, been ringing and saying, can we come over now, sort of thing, and it's like, well, yeah, everything's getting lifted, so it'd be good to see a lot of motorbikes on Ireland again.
What's your situation? Have you got family here?
Yeah.
But you live over in Morecambe?
Yeah. As it is now, I have to have a test within 48 hours, so it just means I don't have to do that, basically. Yeah. So it saves me 30 quid as well, so bonus. Everything, the way it's going back over now, everything's looking a lot better, and I know back home a lot more things are opening up. It's getting relaxed a lot more, pubs and things like that. The figures are dropping. Everything's looking good. I think we're looking pretty positive. So fingers crossed. It's all going the right way.
I live in Ramsey, so I've just been across to do a course. Yes.
And how was the journey?
Was all right. Was actually quite busy because a lot of people wanted to go in today because of this lifting of the restrictions.
So you've had both jabs as well?
Yes, I had both jabs in March and in beginning of June, yes.
And this is just going to make travelling back and forth a little bit easier for you?
Excellent, yes, because really it's actually very difficult. It's almost like in Alcatraz here, like the Rock. You have to be very...
So you can get away a little bit easier now?
A little bit easier without swimming, all the distance. So, yes. So I'm thrilled, that I'm able to come in so easy now.
Travellers speaking to BBC Isle of Man's Alex Bell there. Well, as part of the likely increase in travel, the airport hub is going to be wound down so it can return to its pre-COVID state. The Chester Street hub is said to have 3 times the capacity and will have to cope with more throughput, if you'll forgive the term. I was down there last week to see the 100,000th jab dished out. I spoke to paramedic Peter Smith, who's worked there since it opened in January.
It's been really good. Like I said, we've been really busy since January. A lot of the people who come down here are all sort of retired health workers as well, apart from people working on the normal shifts, and everybody's helped together to try and make this achievable. So it's been a really good experience for all of us. All of us like working here, so we won't be here else. So it's just been a brilliant experience.
Are you tired?
I'm getting pretty tired now at the end of the day. This is the end of the week, obviously. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is always a busy day for us, quite long days. We finish at 4 o'clock today, which is almost like a half day for us, so it's quite nice. But we're just pleased that we're here. Everybody who comes here is really grateful, and it's just nice to see all the members of the public. And people say, are you fed up with it by now? And not really, because we meet so many different people everybody's really pleasant, everybody's really grateful. So we're all really pleased to be here.
You've done more than 50% of the adult population now, so that the first half is over. Do you think it's going to be a harder second half for the team here to get through? Because if the airport closes, there might be more people coming here. What are you anticipating in the couple of months to come?
Well, I think in fairness, I've worked at the airport as well, and I've also done the community vaccinations as well. But I think the capacity we have here, that if the airport hub does close down, this will absorb the airport hub, the amount of people we have coming through, because obviously the volume we have coming through here now has grown considerably, and we can cope with it quite without a problem.
That was paramedic Peter Smith at the Chester Street hub. As a result of the relaxed borders, there's also a push to recruit swabbers to meet an increase in demand for COVID-19 testing. Manx Care is aiming to boost capacity ahead of this expected rise in travel. David Ashford has promised the new recruits will be trained to a high standard, though. I spoke to him about why Manx Care wants to boost its numbers in terms of swabbers.
Well, as we release the borders, we're going to have more people travelling in. Now, while there is the 2+2 exemption, it is going to take time for that to increase and feed through. So there will be people that will require testing, and it's important that we don't end up with huge backlogs. We've always prided ourselves here in the Isle of Man that we've been able to turn tests around pretty quickly, even at pinch points when we've had lockdowns and also large outbreaks. So it's important that we keep that in place, and we recognise that there will be more demand, so we have that ability to be able to be flexible. But also, as travel resumes as well, people will be coming into the Isle of Man not just in higher numbers but more often, so the times of day of arrival will change. So we're looking to extend the opening hours of the grandstand.
Health and Social Care Minister David Ashford there. You're listening to Agenda on Manx Radio. Last week, the Chief Minister took aim at Manx Radio in the House of Keys for what he claimed was sensational reporting of his visit to hospice. Manx Radio refutes this claim. The headline read, "Quayle attends hospice despite recent off-island trip." The subheadline, "Government says it asked the charity if the visit could go ahead." Then, in the text, it clarified Mr Quayle had been granted permission by hospice to attend the ceremony. But the Chief Minister was unhappy and made his views known in the House of Keys. After the sitting, he spoke to John Moss.
Well, I think it was factually incorrect an awful lot, and it implied stuff which wasn't correct. It stated in the press statement that it would appear that my actions were at odds with government's own rules. It mentioned that you can't visit a healthcare setting, but it then didn't go on. You can clearly go on the government's COVID website and says you can visit with authorisation.
The story did mention that hospice had said that.
But you ran a headline saying that I had, in your opinion, not complied with government rules, when in fact I had. Not only that, if you'd spoken to hospice, you would have been told, as we told you in a private email, that hospice, I hadn't even attended a healthcare setting.
Well, we did quote hospice saying yes, it was all okay, they had passed it and
been
approached.
So why run a story which says that the action appears to be at odds with government's own requirements? And why not publish the rules in their entirety? You only publish the rules that says you can't attend, but then there's clarification and it says if you're sick, you can travel, you can go to hospital. If you've got authorisation from the area you're going to.
You're underlining a problem with headlines in that they abridge a story before carrying on with
it.
That may have happened
The way you span it, you spun the story, it was as if I've broken rules and gone to a healthcare setting because I'd travelled. That wasn't the case. I'd asked for clarification before I even went there and was advised I wasn't going to be in a healthcare setting. And even if I had been in a healthcare setting, if I'd got permission, I would have been allowed under the rules. But to go with a headline which says would appear that I've broken the rules when you haven't even bothered to contact hospice yourselves.
Doing a headline saying the Chief Minister agreed to all the rules and accepted them before going to visit hospice wouldn't have been as catchy a headline, if I can put it that way, as the one that was run, I suppose.
But it was a no story. So by running it, you've implied that I've broken the law, which I've asked everyone to keep to themselves, when I hadn't. And you had all the information clearly showing.
The story didn't.
Yes, but why run the headline in the first place when nothing had happened? No rule had been broken, but you chose to run that sensational story.
Chief Minister Howard Quayle. Well, the Douglas Central MHK says the editorial independence of the media must be protected. Chris Thomas told me politicians must make complaints through the appropriate channels.
There are two incredibly important issues here, and in fact, Mr Quayle, I think, fluffed an opportunity to clarify the first important issue. The first important issue is the Manx public should be being told that access to healthcare facilities and attendance at healthcare facilities, we need a reasonable approach to it. We need to be flexible. And so that was the main message that should come out of this. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But unfortunately, that got lost because he used a perfectly reasonable question from Miss Edge, which she clearly intended was to give him the opportunity to explain that, actually to attack Manx Radio, the speaker, and her.
But wasn't he entitled to criticise if he thought it was necessary?
Yeah, but the main point should have been on the fact that we need reasonable approaches to accessing healthcare facilities. But fundamental in all of this, Ewan, is that all broadcasters need editorial independence. That's enshrined in the programme code in the Isle of Man. It's a basic principle of democracy. And I do think that if the Chief Minister had an issue with the way that you covered it, you should have gone about it properly by actually referring the matter to the Communications and Utilities and Regulatory Authority and actually having them look at it rather than just making a cheap shot, because definitely the message the Manx public heard, and they did phone in hugely to your man in line, was that it was a subliminal one perhaps, which was that, you tell people what I want you to tell them, otherwise
well, isn't this a good example of editorial independence? Because Manx Radio has run a story that is factually correct by all accounts, but it has upset the Chief Minister, but it has been published, it has gone out there. Isn't it a good example of editorial independence in play?
Yeah, so well done Manx Radio, and I hope the BBC would have done the same, and I'm sure they would have done, and I'm sure ITV would have done, and I'm sure they would have done, and I hope the other local media outlets would have done as well. So fair play to you, but I do think it's important that over the election particularly we remember that we do have law and good practice that protects democracy from challenges to editorial independence, and that's absolutely vital that we all remember. And the Manx subsidy goes in a large part to preserve a degree of that editorial independence, and it's sacrosanct.
But you will accept that there are times when a politician can disagree with the media and they can sound off about it. Surely that's acceptable and healthy.
I agree, and it's your duty to be balanced. He was right in that sense. It's just the most important issue was he mixed it up with £1 million funding, and the implicit threat was, if I don't think it's balanced, that £1 million is at threat from public subsidy, and that was going too far. So if there is an issue, I don't think there is an issue, because for the reasons you've said, Manx Radio's held its ground and looked for balance, and in fact, my reading of it, the original story was pretty balanced. If there is an issue, government needs to formally make a complaint under the programme code. Incidentally, that programme code's dated 2004, so I think it would probably be quite healthy for us to look again at that programme code. I put down 3 questions, written questions, technical questions about broadcasting in the recent Tynwald, to do with the new application from Sound FM for a licence, to do with the fact that radio stations can't be owned by newspapers to a significant extent, and also to do with the use of PR agencies by government to get their message across. So I do think broadcasting is on the table at the moment, and we do need to make sure that editorial independence is absolutely crucial.
Should politicians ever be making decisions around broadcasting and communications about who gets what and who gets what? Because it's just open to, if one media outlet annoys a politician, they prefer the other media outlet and vice versa. Surely that's an untenable situation.
Yeah, basically the budget needs to be obviously approved. The state budget needs to be approved in Tynwald, and Treasury's got to propose that budget to Tynwald. So in that sense, it's political. But beyond that, the use of those funds and the principles of editorial independence are absolutely sacrosanct, and we need independence about those decisions about editorial matters.
So how do we enshrine that independence in future? What is it? Updating the programme code, do you think?
I think reviewing the programme code, but it's already there in the programme code for broadcast media. It's not there so much for print media. It's not there for the internet. But I do think it's time now, with evolving technologies and the evolving market situations, that we go back and ask the independent regulator to begin the process of reviewing that programme code, especially as government has now started using PR agencies to get its point across, and spending quite a lot of money on that process.
Well, I have to challenge you on your sort of reasons for talking about this issue. You have had a well-publicised sort of falling out with Mr Quayle when you got sacked. So why are you jumping on this? Are you just trying to build political capital ahead of the election?
No, not really. People can think that, and those who want to think that will think that. at. But in essence, I'm a profound believer in doing what's right. I'm sure the Chief Minister believes that about himself, and I'm just asking the Chief Minister to reflect on whether it was really appropriate to say what he did. And I hope he actually asked the Speaker for the chance to make a personal statement in the Keys next Tuesday, because to me, through making that personal statement, he can deal with the issue of editorial independence, and just as importantly, he can deal with the fact that we need a flexible, reasonable approach to healthcare facilities. You need to be able to make reasonable arrangements if you're dropping off a disabled child at the Rebecca House or visiting at hospice. You need to be able to make reasonable arrangements if you're in the rigid Manx vaccination programme, because you can't put off your vaccination for any reason. And there are people who are travelling now for emergencies who need to have it, and government's got a good flexible process. It's always had one for key workers, and that, I think, could be another important part of the personal statement that I hope the Chief Minister chooses to make on Tuesday.
What you raised there is, though, distinct from visiting a healthcare setting for a ceremony or an opening.
Yeah.
Do you think, are you excluding that? Is that's something that you think perhaps shouldn't have happened, going for a sort of thing that isn't an essential trip or visiting a loved one, etc.?
What I'd say was the optics of it are not good, but what I would say was that the management of the hospice is one of the most professional on the island, and I'm pretty sure that they would have dealt with it. I noticed that the picture of him wasn't quite true, so he might want to address that in his personal statement, because the Chief Minister clearly told the House of Keys that throughout his visit he was wearing a mask, but I've seen a picture on the hospice feed whereby he wasn't wearing a mask.
But that was in an outside area.
But it wasn't in the garden, so perhaps that was reasonable. I don't know all the details. I was invited. I couldn't go. I didn't go. Now I do think he needs to take the opportunity of a personal statement on Tuesday to clear up all these issues, which is exactly what I believe Julie Edge was trying to create for him the opportunity. I believe she had even discussed a specific question with Mr. Speaker to protect Mr. Speaker a little bit, and Mr. Speaker said that wasn't appropriate, it wasn't an emergency. But now I think, given what's happened, I do think the Chief Minister should take this opportunity to ask the Speaker for a personal statement in the Keys to clear up some of these issues.
I mean, in the next sort of tranche of COVID regs that inevitably will appear, do you think we should be addressing this slight ambiguity, or some would say it's ambiguity, but based on what certain politicians have done, but do you think that there should be something we should be getting to grips with, just defining what is and isn't appropriate?
Truthfully, Ewan, we go right back to March, April, May 2020. My biggest frustration at that time was the ignorance about when you can make things black and white and when things had to be grey, because we needed to rely on professionals and people to take reasonable steps. So what saved lives in the Isle of Man back in March, April, May 2020, when the risk was more unknown and larger, was the fact that people who were vulnerable shielded themselves successfully. The people who died tragically mostly were to do with an institutionalised care setting. The public now needs to understand that we need to make decisions based on risk. We need to ensure processes are reasonable around that risk, and we need to. That's the main message, and I hope that can be part of what the Chief Minister says on Tuesday in his personal statement. You can't put everything in black and white sometimes.
But when politicians have whipped up a sense of real heightened anxiety and fear, and then sought to unwind that, surely this is what you expect. This is what you created.
That's what I expected, and that's what I expected back in March and April and May, and that's why I got more and more angry at the time, because it was being done in a sort of a Churchillian way.
Well, how do we undo that now?
Well, to be fair, Minister Ashford's doing a good job. People trust Minister Ashford. I hope people trust me, and he's now telling things as they are. I wish, with hindsight, he'd spotted that back in March, April, May, and then he'd have an easier job now communicating. The Chief Minister's less on message in that, but he's trying, and the Manx public really needs to hear that things are not as black and white. Often they're grey. Risk is crucial. Taking a reasonable approach, trusting people like the manager of the hospice to make reasonable adjustments is a reasonable thing to do, and I hope the public's coming around to that. And lastly, I just want to go back and compliment the Manx public for what they did in March, April, May. Most people, the virus didn't come to the island as badly as it might have done, in large part because those who were vulnerable looked after themselves, and most Manx people looked after themselves, so shielding worked. It wasn't actually all about the regulations and putting people in prison as the message came across. It was actually about people acting according to the risks at that time.
That was Douglas Central MHK Chris Thomas. He's standing for Douglas Central in the upcoming general election, which is in September. He's the only candidate to declare in the Douglas Central constituency to Manx Radio so far. That's all from this programme. We'll be back with more from Agenda soon, and you can listen again to this edition online via the Manx Radio website or through Spotify. But for now, Guramayu and goodbye.